Jake Asman Football Show, brought to you by BET US. Sign up now and triple your bonus. That's 125%. Let's get into some NFL football. Presented by BET US SportsBook and Casino. And here's your host, Jake Asman.
Yeah, here we go. Welcome into the first of many Jake Asman Football Shows presented by my friends at BET US. Thanks to BET US for making this possible. We're on a show. We're going to get a chance to talk not just about the Jets or the Giants, but about the entire NFL. Certainly storylines on the daily. So when there's big news, we will cover it here on this show. And joining me today is a first-time guest and someone I've been a fan of for a long time. I figured if we're going to do a show that is all about covering the NFL, reacting to what's going down in the NFL, well, everyone plays fantasy football. So we bring on one of the preeminent fantasy football analysts out there. He is the co-founder of RotoWire. Jeff Erickson joins us now. Jeff, appreciate you coming on. Thanks for being the first guest in the history of the show.
No problem. Happy to do this, Jake. I was catching your latest on Hassan Reddick and all that right beforehand, catching up, kind of listening to what you had to say about the Jets and all that. And so really excited to do this here. Hopefully I can match your energy.
Yeah, I appreciate it so much. And look, I want to get into just some unfortunate news that broke right before we sat down in Minnesota. J.J. McCarthy, who I don't know if he was going to start. It was more likely than not going to be Sam Darnold, at least at the beginning of the year. But the Vikings' first-round pick, he's done for the season. He's having knee surgery. They've already ruled him out for the year, which means it's Sam Darnold time for the entire season in Minnesota. From a fantasy perspective, Jeff, what does that mean for Justin Jefferson, who in a lot of drafts, he might be the first pick, first wide receiver off the board?
Absolutely. And, every Wednesday on RotoWire, I come up with the top 150 rankings for PPR just with the skill position players. And now I'm kind of changing this a little bit there. I think Jefferson, I'm going to probably leave pretty close, maybe move him down one below St. Brown for something like that. But I think Jordan Addison is someone that gets hurt by this a little bit. Maybe Aaron Jones benefits because I think Darnold's going to check it down more. I don't see Darnold as a downfield guy too often here. And I think that's the one thing you're going to see a little bit more. And now they're kind of without a parachute. The Vikings had an early bye, and I thought that's when you'd see the change. McCarthy looked great in the first preseason game. I know they wanted to get him out there. Now he's out all season long. And if your safety net now is Nick Mullins. So it's quite a drop down from that too.
When you look at their offense, and look, Sam Darnold, I know him as a Jet fan watching him.
Right.
I mean, the year with the Niners where he got to sit back and maybe learn from Kyle Shanahan, is that going to be beneficial? Is there any scenario where Sam Darnold, who at times has played well in this league, he could actually maybe be a lot better than what people expect?
It's possible, sure. He's going to have personnel that's really going to look pretty good there. A better offensive line than, say, he had early in his career, I think, with both the Jets and with the Panthers both. I think that's the case. Yeah, I think he could be better. I mean, you're working for the healthy Jefferson, obviously. When they get Hawkinson back midseason, that's going to help as well. I mean, there's some talent there, that's for sure. It's a good offense. It should be a good offense. And a coach, and Kevin McConnell, who really kind of maximizes their talents, too.
Staying with the other rookie quarterbacks while we're on this topic, Jeff, if you were to draft any of the guys out there, who would you potentially target? I'm not saying maybe they're starting for you right away, but who are some of the rookies out there in this league that you're the most intrigued with at the quarterback spot?
Well, I think you got to go up top. I mean, Caleb Williams looked great in his debut, and obviously there was a reason why he was considered a generational prospect coming in. Dynasty leagues, I think you got to go target him right away. I like him better for that, and maybe even Jaden Daniels could be more productive in year one just because he's so mobile. But Caleb Williams is a guy that it's a cornerstone sort of type of guy, so I definitely like him a lot. We saw, McCarthy look good, and Bo Nix actually looked good in Denver, believe it or not. I want to see Drake May play a little bit more than New England allowed him to. I think he's stepping into perhaps the toughest situation of them all. So I probably, as much as I like May, I don't think I'm going to be drafting him for this year.
Let's get into some big picture fantasy football topics. For a lot of people this time of year, hey, they start paying attention to it. They start listening to you on Sirius or reading the work on RotoWire, and they're like, okay, what do I need to know about this fantasy football season? So big picture question to kind of get into it here. What's the biggest piece of fantasy advice you could give to my audience ahead of the season?
know what your league is about going in. Know your scoring system, know the positions, certain things. Every league has its own quirks, and there's some critical league structure things, whether it's super flex, obviously, versus just a one quarterback league is super important. Knowing if it's PPR, half point PPR, standard scoring, knowing whether, how many positions do you start 3 receivers or 2? Is there, how many flex spots do you have? Know all that stuff ahead of time because there's huge implications. If it's like the default settings on Yahoo are often 2 running backs and 1 flex as opposed to 3, and 2 receivers and 1 flex. Whereas like the NFFC and a lot of other places is 3 receivers and a flex. So if you are used to playing best ball a lot, you'll see it's really crazy when it comes to wide receivers. Can't get enough receivers early. You go into your home league on Yahoo and it's only 2 receivers. All of a sudden, like, wait. I need this other running back, and they're dried up all of a sudden. So know your league settings. It's the very most important thing you need to know.
When it comes to running backs, my philosophy for years is always, well, you better get one soon because it kind of thins out real quick. Is that still the same this year, Jeff? What's your approach to drafting a running back in, say, a standard league?
So I do enjoy getting an anchor running back and then not getting another one for like 7 rounds. Anchor running back is what we like to call it. Running back hero as opposed to running back zero. Whether it's CMC or Breece Hall or Bijan, I love starting that way. Even at the end of the first round, if you want to go Taylor or Barkley there, I'm good with that as well. And then waiting a while to get that second running back. I think that's a standard, solid draft philosophy, and I think that's what a lot of good players do.
You mentioned Breece Hall. I got to bring him up because I'm a huge Jet fan. I watched Breece Hall last year coming off an ACL injury with an offensive line that had 13 different combinations in 17 games. An offensive coordinator who admitted he didn't realize how good Breece was as a receiver till after week 8 last season. And objectively speaking, the worst quarterback room in football by far. And he was still second in the NFL or amongst running backs in yards from scrimmage behind CMC. Am I crazy if I want to take Breece Hall in the top 3 of my draft?
Not crazy at all. And in fact, that's common now. And in fact, I did a league in July, RotoWire League. We have a Vegas get together every year during the baseball all-star break. We do a bunch of fantasy drafts, play poker, all that sort of good stuff. I drafted Hall at 1.5. My colleague Jim Coventry drafted CMC at 1.1. He has since offered CMC to me straight up for Hall, and I don't want to take it.
Wow.
Because McCaffrey's got the calf injury. We know his history. They say he's going to be fine for week 1, and I could be a fool. I could be that, but Hall's got a number of years younger on CMC and a better offensive line this year, as you alluded to. I think it's a better sequence here. I think it's a standard no action here. If I have Hall, I'm going to hold Hall. If I have CMC, I'm probably going to hold CMC, but I don't want the 1.1 pick also as a result of this right now.
That's good to know. I like hearing that because I do have the 3rd pick in one of my leagues, Jeff. So I'm thinking about pulling the trigger and taking Breece. The other thing I wanted to get into here, just in regards to some of the injuries, but also when it comes to some of the reports out of training camp with guys holding in or holding out, either way. I mean, whether it's Brandon Ayuk or CeeDee Lamb, for example, what would be the approach drafting one of those players when right now it's still unknown what team they're going to be on, if they're going to be ready to start the season? How do you handle those particular players if you're someone who has a draft over the next coming weeks here?
I feel like there's more of these guys this year than I've ever remembered too. And it's not even their walk year in some cases, like the case with Lamb and Chase. So it's very interesting to see that there. I've been buying the dip. If they're going to give me Chase at 1.7, I'm going to take it. If they're going to give me Lamb, anything after 0.13, I'm going to take it. So that's been my approach. I think Ayuk's the closest one to really coming to resolution actually, which is interesting. I'd rather he stay on San Francisco than get traded to Pittsburgh from a fantasy perspective. Even though he will be the clear number 1 there if he goes to Pittsburgh, but it's either Fields or Wilson throwing him the ball. And it's Arthur Smith as the coordinator of that offense, an offense that typically doesn't support 2 wide receivers very well. So that's not a scenario I really would like to have with Ayuk. So I am kind of downgrading him a little bit if he does go to Pittsburgh. But for the most part, I think these will resolve themselves. Until this week, Chase had been at every single practice. He had been observing practice. Yesterday was the first day that didn't happen. So that's one I'm starting to watch a little bit more. Lamb isn't even there, and that's the one that's a little bit different too. But Cowboys players in the past typically sign. It may go down to the wire. I remember Emmitt Smith, it was like week 3 when he signed 1 year. It does happen under Jerry, but he costs himself too. It's the funny thing is by letting Jefferson and others set the market, he ends up paying a little bit more. So it's kind of wild to see them just dig in and take this stance right now.
We're talking with Jeff Erickson about all things fantasy football. It's the first ever Jake Asman Football Show. Thanks to my friends at BET US. Use my link in the description and sign up. BET US is offering a 125% sign-up bonus up to $2,000 on your first 3 deposits, so certainly take advantage of that. Jeff, I want to ask you about the strategy when it comes to drafting quarterbacks. When do you draft a quarterback? Because there's that big debate. Do you take one of the elite ones early, or do you wait and try and find value? What's your approach to drafting a QB?
Well, it's kind of funny because I've been a card-carrying member of the Wait on the Quarterbacks Club forever.
Me too.
But that in the last couple of years, there's been like some separation of the top quarterbacks. There's been an advantage until last year when it went back to full circle. Unless you drafted Hurts, you probably didn't profit by drafting an early quarterback. And even Hurts down the stretch was not the same. Josh Allen obviously had a new coordinator halfway through the season. He got there with rushing touchdowns, but they stopped throwing the ball as much as they did in the past too. Mahomes, it was a disaster from a fantasy perspective. Still a floor. I mean, a disaster for him is like QB 9. It's not, he's the Mariano Rivera of quarterbacks. You know, you may not have the highest projected total in any given year, but you're super safe with him. But I like waiting still. I don't mind waiting to get the QB 9, the QB 12. Give me a combination of Caleb Williams and Kirk Cousins, and I'll call it a day, and I'll be fine.
How important, it kind of feels like this is obvious, but I think more so maybe now than ever, when you look at just the dual threat ability of a quarterback from a fantasy perspective, if you're going to take a pocket quarterback like Joe Burrow or Aaron Rodgers, for example, they have to throw like 35, 40 touchdowns just to be as good as someone who might only have like 20 touchdowns passing, but then has like 10 rushing touchdowns. So what's your approach in regards to the rushing ability of these QBs nowadays?
It's a definite positive, and it's a definite thing you look for. I like, this is the example I cited. If you're doing waiting, you get one rushing quarterback, whether it's Williams or Daniels, you get another pocket guy like Cousins, you get a little built-in safety. But it's kind of funny. We talk about the running quarterbacks getting hurt, and then you mentioned the 2 pocket passers, Rodgers and Burrow, both got hurt frequently, early for Rodgers and twice with Burrow. And I'm a card-carrying Bengals fan too, by the way. So just as a heads up on that, I try to be objective with Burrow, but we've had 3 straight training camps where he hasn't even made it to the opening bell without getting hurt. One of those, he's coming back from recovering from the knee surgery. But the point is, you're not necessarily safe because your quarterback isn't a runner. I think that's kind of a misconception sometimes. So if your scoring system only gives you 3 points for a passing touchdown, you absolutely should be looking for a rushing quarterback.
What's the line of delineation with that? If it's 4 points or 5 points, it changes things?
4 is pretty much midpoint. The NFFC does 6 points for passing touchdown, so there you don't really care as much. And in fact, sometimes the pocket passer is a little safer. And for all the slander I just threw at Burrow, I'm still drafting him. If QB 8, QB 9. I love Jordan Love at the price this year. I love Dak Prescott at the price this year. I think, even, assuming the Lamb situation resolves, because obviously it's a completely different offense without Lamb.
What's your approach to tight ends? When does the run on tight ends begin in your mind?
I think I want to get one of the top 9 or so. I think it stops with Ferguson. I'd prefer to get Kittle or Pitts or Ingram, and even get one of the elite ones at times. I don't usually draft the first tight end in the draft. I rarely get Kelsey. I rarely will be getting Laporta this year, because I think in the case of Laporta in particular, he got there a lot with some touchdown volume, if you will, that's not necessarily repeatable. So I often am not the first guy to take a tight end, but I do want a plus tight end. I don't want to come out of the draft scrambling and trying to play streaming tight ends in my league.
When it comes to sleepers, I'm sure you get asked this all the time. At this point, I feel like it might be harder to come up with sleepers because the football fan nowadays is so educated on all the players around the league. But who are some guys that you think are maybe a little bit undervalued right now, under the radar, that you would potentially target in the draft?
So I mentioned earlier how I like anchor running back. So I'm often looking at RBs 20 through 40 and trying to find some volume there. So try to get some gold there. I like going after Chase Brown. I think he's going to ultimately win out with the Bengals. I like getting Devin Singletary. Am I allowed to say something good about the Giants here? But
that's okay. Yes.
I do like his upside there. I mean, I should say upside's not the right word. I like his skills, and I like, I like the volume he's going to get. Tyrone Tracy got hurt in practice this week, so we'll see if he's even there to threaten him too much. But I think he's a quality weight on guy. If you really want to get a little gnarly, take a look at the Chargers. The problem is it's a 3-headed monster right now, but it's a Jim Harbaugh coach team. They're going to run the ball. It's just a question of identifying which of those 3 backs, in Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins and Kamani Vidal, which one of those emerges. I like taking Vidal for, a late round pick. And an auction draft I did this week, I got him for $1 in the end game. And I like that. It's not something that's going to pay out right away, but I like having him.
Jeff, final question for me. Your boldest prediction for this fantasy football season is what?
My boldest prediction for this fantasy football season is we're going to go full circle. We're going to go to the point where running backs are going to be a priority next year in drafts. Often we see 7, 8, 9 wide receivers in the first round. I think we'll see 6 running backs in the first round next year.
Wow. That is certainly bold. Jeff, really appreciate your time. Where can people find you?
You can catch me at RotoWire. And if you haven't already checked us out, we do offer a free trial. RotoWire.com/pod gives you a free peek behind the paywall for a couple of days. Catch me on Twitter at Jeff_Erickson and catch me on SiriusXM. I'm on from 8 to 10 Monday through Thursday nights there.
There he is. Jeff, really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jake.
He's Jeff Erickson. My name is Jake Asman. First ever Jake Asman Football Show. A lot still to talk about. Keep it right here. But first, a quick break because let's talk about Bet US.
Michael Vick here at BetUS.com. Get it all. Huge bonuses, great odds, a race book, live in-game betting, and a casino. Bet US, my online sports book and casino.
Thanks to Jeff for coming on there, and thank you to Bet US for sponsoring the show. Once again, check it out. 125% sign-up bonus up to $2,000 on your first 3 deposits. That's as good as it gets, folks. Shout out to Bet US. And, of course, thank you again to Jeff Erickson for coming on the show. Before we wrap the first of many Jake Asman football shows, you heard me open it up in the conversation there with Jeff. You just feel terrible for J.J. McCarthy. You just do. Now, on one hand, you could say, hey, is it the worst thing in the world that a rookie quarterback is not going to play? He gets to sit and learn. I guess that you could find the positive spin with that, but that just stinks all around, right? You never root for injuries. And if you're a Viking fan, you went through it last year with Kirk Cousins, done for the season. You move on without him. You start over by drafting a quarterback in the first round, and the guy doesn't even get to play a regular season game for you after he looked impressive in his preseason debut. And I know it's preseason, but still, that sucks. Just from just a sports fan element, put yourself in the shoes of the Viking fan right now. It stinks. And obviously, it stinks for J.J. McCarthy, and you wish him well in his recovery, and I'm sure he'll have a long career, but I was just bummed seeing that, And I hope this year ends up being beneficial for him down the line. We learned that he learned a lot from sitting behind Darnold, but that's tough for the Vikings, especially given their history at the quarterback spot in recent years with some of these just horrible injuries, because that's really what's happened here, right? They have just had some real unfortunate luck with a lot of different things at the quarterback spot. And, it's tough. Going back to, Teddy Bridgewater and his injury several years ago. Now you have Cousins last year. And now McCarthy. Just brutal. Just brutal. As far as the Vikings' outlook with Darnold, look, I've watched a lot of Sam Darnold. At times, he looks like he could be a real franchise quarterback. We've seen it. We've seen moments. The consistency with Darnold has never been there. That's why I've always felt like he's probably more of a high-end backup, which is what he was basically doing in Minnesota. He was going to be the bridge quarterback until J.J. McCarthy was evidently ready. He has great weapons around him. He has maybe the best weapon in the NFL around him in Justin Jefferson. He's got an offensive coach in Kevin O'Connell who proved last year the guy could coach quarterbacks. The guy won a game with Josh Dobbs when Josh Dobbs didn't know any of the plays. He was actually articulating the plays in Josh Dobbs' helmet during the pre-snap before the radio and the helmet would turn off under NFL rules. So Darnold's in a situation where if he's ever going to, come together for him, it would be right now. So maybe Sam Darnold could still find it. He's certainly still young enough to find it. I just think Darnold kind of is what he is. To me, he's got all the talent, but I think a lot of stuff, it's kind of between the ears with him. Processing doesn't see the field as well as he needs to see it. And maybe having O'Connell will help. Maybe being with Shanahan last year and learning from him will help. He's just 27 years old, so he's certainly young enough to still have a long career in this league. But I just don't believe in the Vikings with Darnold at quarterback. I think they're probably around a 6-win team, 7-win team. I don't see it. So I'm rooting for Sam. Love him personally. Think he's a great dude. But that's just tough for the Vikings with that McCarthy injury. Real tough. Once again, I want to thank our sponsor, Bet US, for making the Jake Asman Football Show possible. Bet US is the answer this fall if you're going to be betting on the NFL. If you're betting on any sport, use Bet US. But for football, come on now. And once again, use my link in the description, and you'll receive a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. So check that out. Thank you to Bet US for sponsoring. Thank you to Jeff Erickson of RotoWire for coming on the show. My name is Jake Asman. This has been the Jake Asman Football Show, and I will talk to you next time.
This video is brought to you by BET US SportsBook and Casino.